Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. He serves on 3 Senate committees, including he's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator Cotton, welcome to This Week on Capitol Hill. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on, Tony.
So let's start with the president's meeting with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Your takeaways from that meeting this week?
Well, I think it simply cements the longstanding ties between the United States and Saudi Arabia. The Crown Prince now has been the de facto leader of Saudi Arabia since his father became king about 10 years ago. And they've made remarkable strides both inside the kingdom in liberalizing their economy, reducing its dependence on oil and gas, while continuing to being the swing producer that helps the United States maintain reasonable prices at the pump for our own citizen. They've stepped up from a security standpoint as well, helping us, along with Israel, deter the threat from Iran and ultimately destroy Iran's nuclear program earlier this year, as well as help decimate Iran's ring of fire, as they used to call it. Now you say it's a ring of smoke and smoking ruins after what Israel has done over the last 2 years. Obviously, there's a lot of good economic news as well, with Saudi Arabia investing in certain critical industries here in the United States, like rare earth element mining and manufacturing, to help us offset China's threat there. So I think all in all, it was a very productive visit by the Crown Prince. And I think it just goes to show that President Trump, unlike his predecessors, is respected around the world by friend and foe alike.
Well, it's certainly different, and it does break the status quo, which was getting us nowhere. But there's some concerns about Saudi Arabia. Number one, their human rights record. Secondly, the defense pack, which would include F-35 fighters, our top military jets, that would require congressional action. And the law currently requires that Israel maintain a qualitative edge over other militaries in the region. How does this shake out when it gets to Congress?
Well, there's no question that we in the United States Congress, along with the Trump administration, are committed to Israel maintaining its qualitative military edge. That's been the case for decades. It's enshrined in U.S. law. We might want to re-examine the foundations of the law to see if we should expand it to account for the current threat environment, not just traditional military hardware like fighters or bombers, tanks, artillery, but also things like artificial intelligence and cyber threats as well. But we're committed to maintaining that edge. You saw Secretary Rubio had a conversation just earlier this week with Prime Minister Netanyahu about the potential for a sale of F-35 jets to Saudi Arabia. Of course, that sale is not final yet. We'll have to make sure that certain security precautions are in place, that the exquisite intelligence and engineering behind that aircraft can't fall into other hands, like in China. That's ultimately what stopped the deal for F-35 jets going forward with the United Arab Emirates a few years ago. So I think it's an important statement in principle and that we're moving ahead with it, but it's not yet settled, and we do have to maintain those security protections along with Israel's qualitative military edge.
So, Senator Cotton, let me go back to the other aspect of that, and I know it's not directly related to our national military and security concerns, but the human rights records of Saudi Arabia. They have consistently been identified as a country of particular concern when it comes to international religious freedom. How should that factor in?
Well, I think we want all of our partners, including Saudi Arabia, to try to improve where they can in their treatment of the rights of the men and women who live within their borders. There's a long history of the United States doing this. You saw it, for instance, in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan and the Philippines and South Korea. The way to help countries reform and change is to work with them to make sure they don't have external threats that are causing them to become even more repressive inside their own countries, and to gently move them forward and make progress. For instance, in Saudi Arabia, they don't have a lot of Christians, but we welcome them to treat the Christians they do have better, to welcome missionaries, to allow them to have houses of worship. Of course, there's many other countries that are much worse than them in their treatment of religious minorities like Christians. President Trump is acting on that as well, if you've seen what he's done in Nigeria recently, for instance. But we always want to work with our allies to help move them forward to treat their own people as best they possibly can.
Let's talk about one of those countries, which the top admiral, Daryl Caudell, said this week that China is building out their Navy, largest Navy. They still don't have the number of aircraft carriers, but they have some other strategic weapons within their arsenal. Is there growing concern that China is becoming a greater military threat?
Absolutely, Tony. China has been on one of the biggest peacetime military buildups in the history of mankind. Over the last 30 years, they've really focused on stopping the United States from ever doing to China what happened to Iraq in 1990 and 1991, where we slowly and gradually built up combat power in Saudi Arabia to help reverse the invasion of Kuwait. They saw that. They said, not in our neighborhood. So they've been designing a Navy, an Air Force, space-based systems, and other unconventional novel weapons that's designed to push the United States away from their shores, push us away from treaty partners like South Korea and Japan, push us away from Taiwan, and even threaten our own territory in places like Guam. That's one reason it's so important that we increase our military budget, that we spend that budget more wisely, as Secretary Hegseth recently said in an excellent speech about procurement and acquisition reform, and that we be crystal clear with the communist dictator that runs China, that we will not allow China to use force to threaten our interests or our friends in East Asia.
Just about 45 seconds left, Senator Cotton. So two aspects to that. Is that why the U.S. is trying to get out of Eastern Europe, allowing NATO to take over more responsibility so we can focus on China? And secondly, in this 21st century, is the way forward more of a coalition approach to addressing the issues in Asia?
Well, there's no question that President Trump rightly wants Europe to take more responsibility for Europe. That's been the case for a very long time. I don't think you'll see us leave Europe any more than we'll leave the Middle East. But in Europe, you want European partners who are large and wealthy to spend more on their defense and spend more of that defense money helping with Ukraine. In the Middle East, I think that's one reason why President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu wanted to settle accounts with Iran's nuclear threat in the region. That's not the only threat, but it was the biggest one. Fortunately, that's now behind us for many years. And then in East Asia, we're, of course, going to have to rely on partners like Japan, like South Korea, like Australia to help counter the Chinese threat. But we're always going to be the indispensable partner in East Asia like we are around the world.
Senator, we got to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us.